Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Please let me know how is the sound, if you can see us and hear us well, and I'm waiting for you to join us. Yes, all good. Hello everyone. So today I have back with me Alex KRAINER. Many of you know who Alex is, but those of you who are coming across this channel for the first time, he is a great geopolitical analyst, commentator, and also he's a market analyst. I would like to ask you very kindly, if this conversation brings you any value, to hit the thumbs up, that's thumbs up, subscribe, and leave the comments down below and share your opinion and your knowledge with us, because we always learn from one another. So Alex, before we start, where people can find you?
I'm active on X. My handle is @nakedhedgy. And I have two publications on Substack. One of them is for traders and investors. It's called iSystem Trend Compass. The other one is a personal blog. It's called Alex KRAINER's Substack. Voila, that's the three main platforms I use.
Wonderful. And I have the links attached already down below the live stream, so you can just scroll down and join Alex there. So I would like to start with a light topic, and then we will go into geopolitical topics. I want to start with gold because I'm a precious metals believer. So I want to start with gold. Many of you follow the trends with that, and this week gold has crossed $3,000 price threshold. Actually almost went to 3,100. I think the highest was 3,096. I'm kind of compulsive obsessive with this, and I check several times a day. So this what happened. And Alex, I want to ask you about this. Let me share the screen and show you. When we go on US national debt clock, okay, you can see it. Can you see this right now?
Yes.
Okay, let me ask you, because I'm aware of this since 2020, to be honest. And when we scroll down in this corner, right here, where I'm circulating, we have dollar to gold ratio now, and dollar to gold ratio, which is SYR. And here it says $9,340 per ounce. What is this about? If you could explain to me, because I believe you can. I would like to understand what does it mean, and in your opinion, what is the real price of gold?
I can't, Anya, unfortunately, I cannot read what it says about those 12,000 and 9,000 figures. What does it say exactly?
So here it says, in this part where I'm circulating, it says the dollar to gold ratio, and then it says SYR, which I don't know what it stands for. Here is $12,000, 615 per ounce, and below it is dollar to gold ratio, 10-year, it says, $9,340 per ounce. Then you have the same paper. Here we have paper to silver ratio, paper to gold ratio, which I don't really care about. I really want to understand this part here. Do you know what is this about?
No, I don't know exactly what those figures are, but I know that, some people look at the ratio of the dollars in circulation, and they usually look at the monetary base and how much money is, how much gold the U.S. Treasury has. And so they say if the dollar was gold backed, an ounce of gold would have to be worth that much. But then you can cut it in a number of ways. You can look at M3 money supply, M1 money supply, M2 monetary base. 10-year that I read, I assume would have to have something to do with a 10-year Treasury note. I don't know, maybe number of 10-year Treasury notes outstanding. I don't know what all those but basically, you know, they're all some kind of a ratio of paper claims to wealth out there and gold at current prices. And so that gives you, you know, prices on the basis of these certain assumptions. So one price is $9,000, one price is $12,000 something. I know that people who look at the amount of gold in held at, and I don't know, I guess Fort Knox, and the amount of gold, the size of U.S. monetary base, and then on the premise that if the dollar were to be gold backed, that the price of an ounce would have to be something on the order of $40,000 an ounce. Now that may seem incredible, but you know, we're going into an inflationary cycle, and it's not the first one. We had the first wave of inflation in 2021, 2022, but you know, inflations often go in cycles. So they go up, they go down, they go up, they go down, and then make three waves before the inflationary cycle fully unravels. That's how it went in the 1940s. That's what happened in the 1970s. And in fact, these waves are so similar to one another that they look almost like the same thing. And the current inflationary cycle that we can say it started in 2021 looks exactly like the first wave that we saw in the 40s and in the 70s. So now we're getting into the second wave, which is usually much larger. And then you have the third wave. And then these three waves of inflation span 10 to 15 years. And so if we go back to the last time we had a big inflation, which was 1970s, gold price appreciated 24-fold, not 24%. It didn't double, it didn't triple. It went up 24-fold from $35 an ounce in 1971 to more than $800 in 1980. So what does that tell us? It tells us that we don't know where the price of gold is going. It just hit all-time highs not last week, 2 weeks ago. No, actually, sorry, it went even higher this week. It reached 3,000.
$3,096.
Yes, okay, right, just short of 3,100. So, you know, some people think like, oh gosh, you know, gold is now too expensive. It's gone too far. Well, we don't know. You know, we don't know. We'll find out. These things take time, but you know, usually a trend when it's in place is generally more likely to continue than to reverse. And you know, if you keep in mind the 1970s experience, it means that there's a lot more upside. It may not happen immediately tomorrow. There's always pullbacks and corrections and price consolidations, which may last 2-3 years, and then a sharp rally again. So I wouldn't recommend people run out there and spend all their money on gold, but you should have some exposure to gold for sure. It's particularly if you can get your hands on physical stuff. It's a good way to not have all of your money in the banking system, and it's a good way to protect your savings from inflation.
Thank you, Alex. But just one more question about gold I want to ask you. If you would, and I know predictions are very tricky because so many things can happen that can change everything, especially with what's going on in the United States right now with the monetary system, etc. But what would you predict for the price of gold before the end of this year?
It's hard to say. I would say between $4,000 and $6,000 an ounce. And I'm not saying that on the basis of any kind of fundamentals analysis of this and that, I'm saying that basically based on the observation of trends. Markets move in trends. My whole career in investing and finance is based on this premise. And trends, when they get going, usually defy our expectations, but especially over the last, let's say, 9 or 10 years. What I have observed is that in one market after another, in securities that may be completely unrelated, we've had a series of hockey stick price appreciations. Where some trend, it looks like relatively normal, and then it goes almost vertical at a certain point, and there's no telling what figure it hits. We've seen this with stock shares like Nvidia and Tesla and similar technology stocks. We've seen it with Bitcoin and certain other cryptocurrencies. We've seen it before that with things like cocoa 2 years ago, with coffee is now ramping up, copper. Before that, we had palladium, which went from something like $800 to $2,400, I think in 2018 or so. Then cobalt in 2016. And so, these things happen in market after market after market after market. It hasn't happened for gold yet. But it seems to me that it's a function of market psychology and of the massive liquidity of massive amounts of money that are sloshing around in the shadow banking system. So for your viewers, shadow banking system is the pension funds, hedge funds, insurance companies, endowments. It's all the basically non-bank financial institutions that manage large amounts of liquid financial investable assets. But they are, unlike banks, they cannot create credit. They cannot print money. So that's the shadow banking system. And there's about between $200 and $220 trillion in the shadow banking system. And my understanding is that if you take all these financial institutions together, their allocation to gold is less than 1%. Okay, so the psychology part is that usually people notice certain security when its price starts to move. So nobody has been interested in gold for a very long time. There's been this cultural brainwash that gold is a barbarous relic, that it's completely irrelevant, that it's a pretty metal, but it's a dumb thing that we dig up from the ground to store it back underground and guard it. And so, all these stories have kind of gone through to the public, and as a result, nobody has been very interested in owning gold. And so now, when the price starts moving, and then people start reading in the news, oh, gold has had the best start of the year since 1986, and gold outperformed Bitcoin and outperformed the S&P 500, and S&P 500 is going down, and all these stories. And then people say like, oh gosh, maybe I need to have a bit more money allocated to gold. And so if all these money managers in the shadow banking system, if even like a small percentage of them decide that they need to increase their their investment in gold, imagine the upward pressure that puts on the price of gold, even if it just goes from, let's say, 1% allocation on average to 2% allocation. And then, if you take the size of the whole gold market in the world, I think it comes to about 10 to 15 trillion dollars, or let's say 10 to 20 trillion dollars. But this part that is readily tradable, that's maybe $1 or $2 trillion. And the shadow banking system is over $200 trillion. So you see, it seems to me that this is where all these hockey stick price charts come from. And so now we just saw the trend in gold take off in earnest. And it's been going, let's say, for about 12 or 14 months. So it went from low 2000s to over 3,000 now. And now people are starting to pay attention. And so if now people start deciding, oh gosh, gold is the next thing, I have to be in gold, then that means that maybe the price is going to go up much, much higher. And, from 3,000 to 4,000 or 5,000 or 6,000, it doesn't take much. And maybe from today's point of view, it may seem absurd, but think about the price of Nvidia, think about the price of Tesla, think about the price of Bitcoin. Market psychology is very strange. I always tell people the story when the company the hedge fund firm where I worked last launched a Bitcoin fund in 2013. And at the time, Bitcoin was, I think, something between $300, $400, $500 per Bitcoin. I think it was closer to 300, but it doesn't matter. And we started offering investors to buy shares of our Bitcoin fund. And people go, what are you talking about? What is this Bitcoin? You guys are going to ruin your reputation in the market. What the hell are you doing? Nobody was interested. So nobody was interested at all in investing in Bitcoin. And then came 2017. I think it was 2017, 2018, when Bitcoin had one of these slow trends, picking up. And then boom, suddenly it goes vertical and reaches $19,000 per Bitcoin. And now the phones were ringing off the hook. A lot of these people who had no interest in Bitcoin when it was $300, $400, were very keenly interested in Bitcoin at $19,000. Do you see? It's irrational, but that's how things happen in markets. And this is why I've been a lifelong trend follower, not only by practice but also by conviction, because I've been looking at this and I've been seeing it happen again and again and again and again throughout my career. And then you can go back 2,000 years, and if you pick up the book The Art of War, what does Sun Tzu say in one of his famous quotes? There are three great avenues of opportunity in life: events, trends, and conditions. So trends, one of the three great opportunities in life. And so if this was observed 2,000 years ago, and trends are obviously a matter of human psychology, then it's going to be with us probably forever.
So this is so fascinating, because in this unpredictable world, we can actually still predict things. Like I always say, watch what they do, not what they say, because they made this almost like a campaign, Alex, against gold, to discourage.
Oh yes.
Look into it, and meanwhile, the banks are buying gold, and very often many countries are not reporting on the actual number, how much gold they have, right? So we leave this subject for now, but I want to ask you again.
But I just wanted to very gently push back. It's not that you can predict things. You can predict that markets move in trends. You cannot predict when trends are going to start happening, how high they may go, and how long they might last. You just know that they do happen. And then, so what trend followers do is they don't try to predict it. I always say, like, the best metaphor is maybe like the fishermen. You know, they have to go out at the sea and they have to throw their nets. They don't know where the fish might come up. But if they do it every day, they know that every so often a large school of fish will pass about there somewhere, right? And then the only way for them to catch that fish is not to predict exactly where the school of fish is going to be on what date, but to always keep doing it, which is costing you time. You have to be patient, you have to be persistent, and so on. And then when the school comes, which you cannot predict, you bring your catch. And it's very similar with trend following. So it's not a question of prediction. It's a question of just casting your net all the time, and then when the trend comes, then you land your catch.
Because we really don't know, like you said, from the art of war, what kind of events might take place that will affect.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But I agree with you. This is profoundly fascinating because it really is a manifestation of collective human psychology. And I don't know, to me at least, there's something deeply fascinating about it. And the way we conceive rational behavior and decision making at the individual level is very, very different from what you find on the collective level. But nevertheless, it seems to me that we are actually hardwired for collective intelligence, but we don't necessarily know, we don't know what that is, how it works, what role we individually play in the collective, or let alone how to control it. We can't really.
This is brilliant, actually. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I'm just still staying on this topic. I have more questions, but that's so true because look at the psychology of it. People tend to, when gold is going up or Bitcoin or whatever is going up, they tend to be like this almost sense of craving appears, like I wouldn't say maybe greed, craving, those emotions like I want to have it. It's almost like in life with people. If someone is really desired by many want to desire the same person, and they overlook someone who actually might not be so much on the pedestal but has enormous potential, but that is someone to invest in, right?
Yes.
And this is the same. Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, what happened? Let's say you're walking down the street and you see a crowd of people gathered around something because they're looking at something. Your almost instant reaction is to see, oh, what are they looking at? I have to go and check it out. So you want to kind of push through the crowd to see what the hell's going on there. Or if you look at people looking up at something, then you look up and you're like, what's going on? What's there? But one of my favorite examples is if you're in a group of people and somebody starts to laugh hard, and then you see everybody starts to laugh, but only one person knows why they're laughing, right? And everybody else laughs, but they don't know why they're laughing. There's something to that. Something intangible connects us, and our consciousnesses, our collective consciousness comes together, and
or maybe, can I say, Alex, sorry to interrupt you, or maybe this is the example of how not to follow the crowd and use your own brain, because if there is something like a consciousness that goes into a crowd and then you have like this one massive brain, it's almost like an experiment on humanity, like you said, and then they tap into the same energy field. instead of using their own brain and following their own gut.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go to IMF, because I came across this article and I would like to ask you about IMF. So, this is from today, everyone. From TASS, and it says, IMF Board of Directors approves 400 million tranche to Ukraine. This will bring the total disbursements, sorry for my English, under the IMF supported program to 10.1 billion US dollars. So apparently this is another support for Ukraine, but my question is not so much about Ukraine as much about IMF, Alex, because let me open one more thing.
Anya, just a question. What was the date on that article?
Today, 29th of March.
Oh, today. Okay.
Okay, so let's look at this. So IMF origins. It says that was originated IMF. Okay, so here is the International Monetary Fund. Originated from the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944, aiming to establish a framework for global economic cooperation and stability, formally coming into existence in 1945 after 29 countries ratified its Articles of Agreement. Alex, how much saying IMF has, how much power, influence it has on the governments in the countries? And are there any countries that are not under its influence in the world?
It has massive influence on government, and most governments are under its influence. There are some who, at great pain at risk, throw out the IMF. Like we saw Burkina Faso, now Ibrahim Traore threw them out. Vladimir Putin threw them out. The Yemenis threw them out. Evo Morales threw them out in Bolivia. But usually, you know, what happens is that if you want to break your agreements with the IMF, and even if you pay off all your debts, you become target for overthrow, for regime change, for assassination. So after Evo Morales threw out the IMF, he was overthrown in Bolivia. And then after the Houthis in Yemen rejected a IMF loan with, you know, restructuring program and all that, then the war in 2014 started. And IMF played a very, very pivotal role, both in Ukraine after the coup, and I'll explain this, and also in Russia during the 1990s when the Russian economy was completely destroyed. I think that in the 1990s, Russia lost something like 50% of its GDP. Worse collapse than during World War II. Go ahead, please. Yes, in the back row, young lady.
I'm at the front already. During Yeltsin or Putin already?
Yeltsin in Russia. Yes, under Yeltsin in Russia. And so in the let's look at Ukraine. So Ukraine, since its independence, it has been, you know, it has had IMF providing assistance, and the assistance always comes with strings attached. They always say, well, we'll give you these loans, but you have to implement these structural adjustments, you know. And so the back and forth between Ukraine's governments and the IMF was going on for more than 2 decades. And, you know, the Ukrainians tried to follow these structural adjustments, which are always aimed ostensibly to making a country more competitive. But if you ask yourself, what does it mean to be more competitive? Generally, it means to make your country more attractive to capital, to financial capital investment, which means that you have to basically gut the welfare state in your country. You have to loosen up the labor laws so that businesses can easily hire and fire people. You have to clamp down on healthcare and pension plans. Make it all more expensive and less beneficial to the because everything that goes into workers' compensation, overtime, bonuses, any kind of perk, healthcare, dental care, pensions, retirement earlier or later, all of those things that favor labor, ordinary people, diminish profitability of companies, because the less, if you could just have slave laborers and then shoot these slaves the day they become, let's say, unproductive below a certain threshold, where it's not worth feeding them anymore to work, and you shoot them. So let's say, then you would, in that way, you would maximize your company's profitability, or at least you would put the labor cost close to 0%, right? So IMF structural reforms generally try to make a country attractive to financial capital. That also includes things like doing away with environmental protections, because that also costs. Imagine if you have some kind of a dirty manufacturing process, and then the local laws oblige you to divert dirty waters, to filter them, to have certain processes in place so that all the toxins don't go straight into the atmosphere. All of that costs money. And so that's what the IMF tends to do. Anyway, the Ukrainian governments have tried to comply with IMF requirements, but they haven't always succeeded. Nevertheless, under the IMF's guidance, Ukraine became the world's worst performing economy between 1991 and 2014. The worst, dead last in the world. They lost 35% of their GDP between 91 and 2014. One of the only 5 countries in the whole world that had negative GDP growth over that time. And then what happened after the coup in 2014, when democratically elected President Yanukovych was overthrown, and then Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Pyatt, U.S. ambassador, handpicked the new government, which was Arseniy Yatsenyuk and all these Nazi parties that they gathered around themselves. That triggered a resistance movement in the south and east of the country. So where there's large concentration of Russian-speaking people, they said, you guys are not a legitimate government. You took the government over through a coup, and we will not comply with your demands. Well, it so happens that the south and the east of Ukraine is where the bulk of the nation's wealth comes from, and something like 80% of the country's GDP comes from the south and the east. So the Donbas and the Zaporozhye region and so forth. And so when these regions, when these oblasts started to say, no, we're going to be autonomous of you, we're going to be independent, then it was the IMF who conditioned their support to Kiev government with destroying the resistance movements in the east and the south of the country. So there was I think there was U.S. Treasury Secretary was Jack Lew at the time, and the head of the IMF was Christine Lagarde, the current head of the ECB. And so there was a meeting between them, and then Christine Lagarde kind of gave the order that these these loans that were going to be given to Ukraine, to Ukraine's new government, were conditional upon them establishing control over the whole country, meaning also the Donbass and Zaporozhye, Odessa, all of that. And then we had that in May, 2nd May 2014, we had that massacre in Odessa, where they burned 42 or 46 people alive in the trades union building in Odessa. And then there was that triggered the so-called anti-terror operation. An anti-terror operation, the IMF gave loans, you have to unite the whole country, you have to take control of the whole territory, especially get us this part that's responsible for 80% of your GDP. Thank you very much. And then the people like Joe Biden and Carl, the former Swedish Prime Minister.
I'm looking up now. Continue. I will look him up.
Yeah, him, a whole bunch of US and NATO military officials, and John McCain and John Kerry and John Brennan, they all started jetting back and forth, and then they pretty much ordered the Ukrainian government to launch the anti-terror operation, the ATO, which was an extremely brutal assault with the military, with heavy equipment, with aircraft and helicopters, started to bomb the civilian population of the Donbass in order to scare them, in order to intimidate them into submitting to the new junta in Kiev. And for the same low price, also provoking Russia into intervening in Ukraine and getting that war going in earnest. But the IMF played a very, very pivotal role in defining the turn of events after the coup, because the new government in Kiev, they didn't have money. They needed money from Western donors. But the Western donors said, like, okay, we'll give you money, but most of your GDP originates from where these rebel people are living, so you have to crush them, and then we're going to give you money.
So Alex, the money that IMF, let me ask you this on that note here, because when I open this up and it says this, where did IMF get their money? It says, how true is this, Alex? IMF funds come from 3 sources: member quotas, multilateral and bilateral borrowing agreements. So how accurate is this?
Anya, my assumption is that it's not accurate at all. Because these people, they have their rules, they have their laws, and whatever you call these regulations that govern the use of this fund, the investing, when it suits them, when it's expedient for them, when they have some goal that they need to achieve, they routinely violate their own rules. Again, example of Ukraine. When there was that famous back and forth between Ukraine President Yanukovych, before he was overthrown, he was supposed to sign the EU association agreement. And then it turned out that the cost of Ukraine transitioning to become a partner of the European Union and ultimately joining European Union was going to be $160 billion. And so, among other people, they went to the IMF to look for help, to say, okay, we want to do this, but we don't have the money. Can you help us? And then IMF offered them something like, if I'm not mistaken, about $4 billion, but with such harsh conditions attached that the prime minister at the time, Azarov, said, "This is impossible. These conditions are so harsh that we cannot proceed with this association agreement. We just cannot afford it at all." And nobody else was offering them help. The only side that was offering them help was Russia, and the Russians offered them a completely non-conditional loan of $15 billion. And the IMF was saying, well, we'll give you $4 billion, but there's going to be some really, really harsh strings attached. And then, after the coup, suddenly the IMF had money for Ukraine. And I think they gave them almost straight away, they gave them something like more than four, maybe $6, maybe $8 billion. And then much, much more if they managed to get control of the Donbas. But I forgot what I was going to say next. I'm sorry.
No, but I have a question. That's good. I want to ask you, so in a very simple way asking this, who do you think is, who is running this? Like, who is, like Wizard of Oz? Who's behind this curtain? Is it Rothschilds, Rockefellers? What kind of Zionists are behind it? Because clearly this is very profitable project, and it looks like almost like ownership of the countries, in my opinion. So who you think is running this? Who's pulling the strings behind it?
It's difficult to know that, because they took pains to make sure that they conceal themselves. But I think that inevitably the ultimate beneficial interests are going to be these banking families. And I think that the IMF and the World Bank exist exactly in order to conceal their hand and their role in world affairs.
There we go. So this, like, they create the wars, then they offer the solutions, problem, reaction, solution, right? The same formula.
Yeah, exactly. And I've noticed another thing, because I've asked myself, I've often wondered, well, everybody seems to get a rotten deal from the IMF. And it always, when was the last time you heard of some country taking IMF loans and implementing the structural reforms and not ending up economically devastated and broke? That's what always happens every time. You've never heard of a country following IMF's structural reforms and taking their loans and then becoming this burgeoning prosperous nation. That never happens. So I used to wonder, why do people not just throw them out? Why don't they just tell them, keep your money?
Don't sue them? Is there any international system that you can actually sue them for that? Take them to court?
I suppose you can sue them if you enjoy losing court cases. I don't know that somebody sued them and won their court case on anything substantive. But I don't know. The fact that I don't know doesn't mean that it never happened. But what I noticed is that government officials tend to be very afraid of the IMF. And I mentioned that in one of my, I don't know if I mentioned that in one of the podcasts or in one of my Substack articles, but then some people wrote me when it's like, oh yeah, like I used to work for so-and-so in that country. And I noticed that all these government officials, when they were talking about the IMF, they would talk about it in hushed up tones. And if the IMF people were visiting, they would make sure that they discuss everything very quietly, so that it's, I don't know, but there's something very mysterious about it. It's not what they teach us in school, international law and arbitration and all these wonderful above board transparent things that happen. The real deals are, I think, pretty much done mafia style. And if you don't comply, you get assassinated or a regime changed or invaded.
Yes. Alex, I have 2 more questions, but I'm not sure what time. How much time do you have?
I have time for 2 more questions.
Thank you so much. All right. So I want to play a short clip that I found on Instagram because, as many of you know, on April the 2nd, I will not say what I want to say because I was actually about to say how they played the whole humanity with the calendar when the year starts. So April Fool's Day, that's another story. But on April 2nd, Trump's Liberation Day will start. And I came across this clip on Instagram. And this young man is talking about tariffs and Trump's approach to it. And I would like to ask you, Alex, do you agree with this young man? Is he explaining this in your opinion in the way that is accurate? So let me just share it, everyone.
Whatever you think of Trump, his economic plan makes complete sense. The US has 36 trillion in debt. In 2025, they will spend 6 trillion, but will only collect 4 trillion in revenue. So they need to borrow 2 trillion, and this will increase their debt to 38 trillion. Trump's economic plan is based on 3 levers. Number 1, cut expenses by 1 trillion, which is Doge, Elon Musk. He's targeting waste and fraud, like social security payments for people who are 150 years old. That is just fraud. 2, increasing revenue by 1 to 2 trillion through, number 1, tariffs. They will increase tariffs from 50 billion to 500 billion target. People will say, but other countries will retaliate. They will not be able to do it. The US is the biggest customer on earth. They consume 20 trillion every year. They are the biggest importer. They import 3 trillion every year. Plus, the current tariffs is actually not fair. Why should US cars entering Europe faces 10% tariffs while the European cars entering the US just pay 2.5%? It's not fair. And because of the tariff changes, it now makes economic sense to build factories and businesses inside the US again. That means more jobs, means tax-paying businesses, and more foreign investment coming in. He will also increase revenue by deregulation. He will remove unnecessary regulations and rules, making it easier to do business so business can grow faster, generate more tax revenues. He also make this gold card, which is offering lifetime US residency for 5 million. I think at least 1 or 2 million individuals globally can afford it. So if just 10% of them, if just 100,000 people buy this card, that's 1 trillion in incremental revenue. The third lever is he will reduce taxes. If he successfully cut 1 trillion in waste and expenses and add 1 to 2 trillion in revenue, the US will have a surplus. They will have more money than they want. So he will cut taxes. For individuals, anyone gaining more than 150K, he will make them pay 0 taxes. And on corporate taxes, he will go down from the current 21% to 15%, compared to the European average of 22%. France average is 25, I think, and Germany is 30. So at 15% corporate tax, the US will become one of the most business attractive countries on earth. Bottom line, this is exactly how a government should be run, efficiently. Because when you eliminate waste, the money can actually go where it is actually needed, to the elderly, to the sick, to people who cannot work. And that is the real purpose of government, to protect the weak. Very few countries have the political will to do it. It takes leaders with backbone, charisma, and clarity of vision. Do you have leaders in your country pushing for real reform, or are they talking about non-relevant side topics? And let me know if you think Trump plan is bad. Let me know why, because I think it is just common sense. Whatever.
Thank you, Alex, for watching. I appreciate this video very much because in a simple way, it explains to people like myself who are not financial experts. But I would like to know your thoughts, if you can share with the audience. Is he accurate in what he was saying, or he's not?
No, I think everything he said makes perfect sense. But you know, the problem is not simple. And we will see how well the Trump administration is going to be able to execute. I think that when you have a how do you call it, reserve currency, and then there's a lot of money, a lot of your American dollars and dollar-denominated assets sitting abroad, which is also an estimated $32 trillion, then any significant policy change can destabilize your economy, and then the consequences. Maybe everything he said makes very good sense long term, but short term there might be hiccups and the thing could get bumpy. I think that one of the worst vulnerabilities of the American economy is the inflation. And, inflation is coming. And when you start imposing tariffs, you are beginning to close the trade gap, the trade deficit, right? Because you're going to be importing less. Foreign trade is one of two. Okay, let's put it this way. There are two very large inflation absorbent in an economy. One is the stock market, and the other one is foreign trade. So you use foreign trade to export inflation to other countries. What I mean by that is that you buy goods and commodities from commodity exporting countries, and you pay for them in dollars. And then those dollars stay in those countries' accounts with the Federal Reserve, meaning they don't go and circulate in the domestic economy, so they don't put pressure on consumer prices at home, right? So you get to put a lot of liquidity into the economy. You get cheap imported goods. You pay for them in dollars that stay in these foreign exporting nations' accounts at the Fed. They get recycled into US treasuries, but they don't enter into your consumer economy, so they don't push up domestic prices. But, in order for that to happen, you have to have the trade deficit keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so when you start introducing tariffs, two things are going to happen. Like, you put 25% tariffs on European cars, which means the European cars are now going to be more expensive. Maybe not 25%, but some number there. 100%, all the domestic car producers are going to jack up the prices of their own vehicles, because now they can, right? So you're going to get inflation, and then because you're going to be reducing the trade deficit, you're going to also be closing the flow of dollars into that big inflation absorbing reservoir of money. But similar thing happens with the stock market, because the money that goes into the stock market also doesn't circulate in the economy, so it absorbs a lot of inflation. So from these tariffs, you're going to get inflationary pressure. I would be surprised if people in the Trump administration don't already know this and have, contingency plans of how to deal with that. And I think that one contingency plan that they're going to ambush us with is going to be a dual currency system. So they're going to put a Chinese wall between the domestic dollar that's going to circulate in the domestic economy and the foreign dollar that's going to be used for foreign trade. And then they're going to let the foreign dollar collapse, but they're going to try to keep the domestic dollar stable. And then everything else this man said makes complete and total sense. It'll take years, however, for all of these pieces to fall into place, because you're attracting corporates to your country. Well, it takes time for them to decide and to come and to do their operations. I think it'll be also necessary to restructure the banking system so that small and medium-sized businesses can obtain funding for their operations, so that you're not creating an economy of large corporates who all try to become monopolies or oligopolies, and then you get again a very sluggish economy with very high prices, because the first thing they try to do is get control of the markets to make sure that they can command the price. We'll see, but there's also another element. I, like you, I lived a few years of my life in the United States. I lived not as long as you. I lived about 3.5 years there as a student. And I have to say that as much as I love the United States and the American people, I never felt like I wanted to live there. Now, for somebody who's grown up in Europe, it's a different kind of life. It doesn't suit me at all. And so I prefer to live where I am. But I have to say this, for the first time in my life ever, since Donald Trump came into his second term, and I could criticize him viciously for his Middle Eastern policies. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a Trump cultist. But for the first time in my life, I'm thinking, I think the United States might be a good place to go and live now. That's, not just me. I have 2 sons. Even as a father, I'm thinking, where do I see a brighter future? Where do I see a better future? And for the first time in my life, I think that the United States is maybe a more promising place than Europe. And I wonder if many more people don't feel the same way, which means that they might be thinking about moving their businesses and their companies. And then if you give them also incentives like 15% corporate tax rate, if you do away with a lot of this regulation and bureaucratic red tape, then it makes life easier, and it makes things it makes it easier to develop a business and have a good life.
Alex, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. And so I think that many people must be thinking along the similar line. I'm sure we're not alone.
Thank you for that. Last question is about Putin's proposal. He proposed an external governance in Ukraine. You probably heard about it, right?
Yes, I did.
And I don't know, maybe let me open this article, because there are some words that I don't remember in English. So let's go through this again. I posted it in my video yesterday. When he was in Murmansk, he proposed this international practice here. He reiterated that such a precedent under the auspices of the UN existed in East Timor, New Guinea, and parts of former Yugoslavia. Such a practice does exist, and technically it is possible to discuss the possibility of introducing interim governance in Ukraine under the UN auspices with the United States, with European countries, naturally with our partners and friends, in order to hold a democratic election there, in order to bring in a competent government trusted by people. This is referring to Ukraine, and then hold talks with it about a peace treaty and sign legitimate documents which would be recognized worldwide and be reliable, and stable. So what are your thoughts on that, Alex?
I believe, Anya, that this is high-level trolling of the West. What Vladimir Putin is proposing is very reasonable and very constructive. That, he's right. That would be a solution that should be acceptable to everybody. But I think that he knows that Western financial interests have everything staked on Zelensky government remaining in power and being legitimate. So, we were talking about those rare earth deals. we're talking about Britain signing the 100-year partnership agreement with Ukraine 4 days before Donald Trump's inauguration and 7 months after Zelensky's presidential term had expired. So the fact that they signed it with the president who is representing his country unconstitutionally and therefore illegally means that they get nothing. Everything they have there depends on them preserving this government and making sure that the next government is still under their control, so that they can, make all these deals stick, because Great Britain is counting on owning pretty much the bulk of Ukraine's wealth after the war finishes. Ukraine is going to, if they have their way, Ukraine is going to be a colony of Great Britain. But if the UN, if a neutral force comes there to administer the country, and if they allow free and fair elections, there's a very good chance that the next government that's going to be in Kiev is going to align with Russia and not the West. And then, they're going to look at all these agreements and they're going to say this is all illegal. They're going to tear all this up. And then, the Western financial interests are going to get zero out of the whole deal. And I think that the Russians understand this perfectly well. And I think that the reason why Mr. Putin is floating this proposal is because he knows that the British and the Europeans are going to reject it. Are going to say, no way, no how. It's going to be Europe, NATO, European troops, EU, some coalition of the willing that we are going to define and we're going to decide. And then, they're going to run elections. They have to eventually, but they're going to make sure that they have control of the media, that they control the election process and, the voting and everything, so that whoever comes after Zelensky is exactly the same kind of person like Zelensky, who's going to say, like, yep, we will honor all of the deals with BlackRock, with Great Britain, with the IMF, World Bank. All of that is cast in stone, and we're going to be paying all of our debts, and it's going to be Western banks and Western corporations that are going to own us. And we're going to implement every IMF structural reforms program, and we're going to be a colony of Great Britain and Europe. So I think that knowing all this, Vladimir Putin is floating this proposal because after the Westerners reject it, he's going to say, well, okay, you rejected every proposition we put in front of you, so we're going to take care of it ourselves. And they're going to, when they finally defeat Ukraine and when the Ukraine finally capitulates, then the Russians are going to control Ukraine, and they're going to impose their own terms of armistice.
Thank you, Alex. I honestly don't believe that Ukraine will exist, in my opinion. And I think that most of it will be under Russia. And then whatever is remaining left will be kind of like a buffer zone or something of that nature. I don't know what they...
It's yeah, I think that's very possible. And I think that this is maybe exactly the reason why Vladimir Putin is going this way, because when the process stabilizes finally, when the whole crisis comes to its final conclusion, the Russians are going to be able to say, we gave you every possible off-ramp. All you wanted to do is continue the war. So, now you have what you have.
Which means nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, it's, the Russians have been very patient and very wise about the way they have managed this. this whole process. They have always tried to negotiate. They have always put forward, draft treaties to avoid going to war, to avoid fighting. As soon as they started with the special military operation, they immediately reached out to Kiev and to say, we don't have to do this. We don't have to fight. Let's sit at the table. Let's negotiate a peace. And the Ukrainians were smart enough to say, yeah, let's do that, until Boris Johnson came down and he said, no, fight to the last Ukrainian. War. Don't talk to the Russians. Don't negotiate anything. We're going all or nothing. And they're going to wind up with nothing.
Alex, thank you so much. I really appreciate that you had time to join me today and time for all my questions. Very, very much. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I'm sure you heard a lot of great points today, and share your opinion with us. I always appreciate some nice comments, just respectful comments, please. And with this being said, if you would like to support Alex's work and follow him, just scroll down under the live stream. You have the links attached already. And we see you on the next one. Thank you again, Alex. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Anya. Always a pleasure. And greetings to everyone out there.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much.